6 German shepherds circle around a little girl. The next moment astonishes the entire town. On a sun-washed afternoon in a small Montana town, the park hums like a beehive, sprinklers ticking, swings sighing, sneakers skimming chalk lines. Parents hover near picnic tables, half laughing, half listening to Officer Bennett's whistle as 6 German shepherds glide through razor-sharp drills. Collars click, paws drum. Every head tracks his hand like a compass needle. People admire from a polite distance, unsure whether to clap or keep still. Lily, 7, slips along the path with a paper kite she drew herself, a fox, smiling, its tail fluttering behind her shoes. She loves animals more than crowds, and the feeling is mutual. Strays seem to find her the way water finds low ground. Today her braid bumps her shoulder as she counts ladybugs on the railing, whispering numbers only they can hear. Bennett snaps, forward. The line flows. Left. It flows again. Down. 6 chests hit grass in perfect time until the 4th dog twitches an ear. Then the 5th inhales, slow and deep as if catching a signal in the wind. The 1st stands. The 2nd follows. Bennett's jaw tightens. The whistle lifts. The formation loosens like a knot pulled by invisible fingers. Phones rise. A stroller wheel knocks a curb. Somewhere a soda fizzes too loudly. The dogs peel away, not charging, not bristling, moving like a quiet tide toward the path. Lily looks up from her kite. The foxtail flutters once, twice, then stills. They circle her, shoulders square, ears forward. The ring closes with eerie grace, leaving Lily in a bright coin of sunlight. She doesn't flinch, her fingers low. The nearest shepherd leans in, nose hovering at her wrist, listening to something no one else can hear. Bennett runs. The town holds its breath. Then Lily whispers one soft word, and everything tilts at once. What happened next will shock you. The town's park breathed with easy rhythm under a bright Montana sky, a bowl of light that made every leaf shine and every puddle flash. Sprinklers ticked in patient arcs, threading the grass with silver needles that caught the sun and drifted away as mist. Laughter hopped from swing set to slide and back again, chasing the quick feet of children who drew hopscotch galaxies in chalk and declared them new worlds. A bakery beside the square released warm air scented with cinnamon and butter, and the fragrance wandered across benches where grandparents traded stories and peeled oranges for small hands. On Saturdays the farmers' trucks brought jars of honey lined like amber lanterns. But today was an ordinary weekday, the kind that holds steady simply by being itself. At the far end of the lawn, orange cones marked a training grid where Officer Bennett, the town's exacting K-9 instructor, directed 6 German shepherds through drills with a calm that could cut through static. He wore a navy shirt pressed into right angles and boots that moved without waste. Nothing about him sagged or muttered. His reputation had grown in the kind of soil that favors consistency. He arrived early, stayed late, and returned calls before the second ring. If a leash slipped, he caught it. If a rumor started, he let proof do the talking. People respected him, even when his manner left little room for small talk, and they respected the animals more. Each shepherd carried muscle like braided cable and intelligence like banked fire. Under Bennett's hand they flowed from heel to toe with a precision that made onlookers straighten unconsciously, as if posture might help them understand the language of movement unfolding in front of them. Children watched with round eyes. Parents balanced curiosity and caution. Some townsfolk clapped after a clean sequence, then glanced around to see whether clapping was allowed. Others kept a few extra yards between themselves and the harnessed power. Sarah, who ran the antique shop, admired the sheen on their coats, but said she would cross the street if one met her alone at dusk. Tim, who had once been a loud 5th grader and was now a quieter 8th grader, claimed you could see your reflection in their eyes if you stood close enough. Close enough was a variable most preferred to leave untested. Lily preferred closeness more than most. She was 7, small and composed, with a braid that never quite held every strand and sneakers that told the story of many gentle errands. She liked places where living things could be themselves. Before school she left crumbs in a saucer near the shed for a one-eared tabby that trusted her more than it trusted the morning. After school she read picture books aloud to her hamster, Pip, timing page turns to the tick of the clock because Pip seemed to listen harder when the rhythm stayed true. Where other children saw a blur of fur and sound, Lily saw attention, hesitation, preference. People in town knew her as the child who waved at dogs before waving at their people. Shyness fitted her the way a soft sweater fits a slight frame, not as armor but as comfort. That afternoon she walked the long path that ran between the lakelet and the training grid, tracing her fingers along the fence rail where paint had weathered into freckles. Sun glazed the water and shot brightness through the spray. The park smelled of clover, hot wood and sugar. Bennett set the dogs in a line that looked poured from a straight edge. He flicked 2 fingers and they slid forward, shoulders rolling in harmonious cadence. A palm rotated and the entire line pivoted left, tails still, paws thudding in muffled unison. A slice of whistle and 6 bodies collapsed to their elbows as if the grass itself had pulled them down. He spoke about thresholds and arousal states to a semicircle of teenagers wearing visitor stickers, explaining how a working animal reads a human face the way readers parse a sentence. The example landed, heads nodded, parents along the benches traded looks that said the show was impressive, but also that large teeth are still large teeth. Phones hovered half-raised, unsure whether documenting seemed supportive or rude. A breeze folded the edge of Lily's dress against her knee. She counted ladybugs on the rail, up to 7, then began again because the counting was part comfort, part game. The one-eared tabby shadowed her ankles, a soft escort that pretended independence. She tore a corner from a cracker wrapped in a handkerchief and let the cat nibble while Pip waited in imagination for the rest at home. Her gaze drifted to the grid. Bennett lifted a fist. The shepherds rose as one, shook once like quick thunder, and set off at a trot that built into a run precisely until it did not. The 4th dog tilted an ear toward the lakelet as if a sound had opened a door. The 2nd drew a long breath, tasting something finer than one step hesitated, another aligned with that hesitation. Bennett's whistle touched the air, his hand sliced a stop sign. The formation absorbed the signal, trembled and loosened. No scramble, no scatter, a deliberate breaking from one purpose toward another. 6 noses angled, 6 spines lengthened, and 6 sets of pads negotiated grass with the quiet authority of confidence. Their path curved, not toward mischief, not toward escape, but toward the narrow stretch where the rail met the cones and a child stood counting small red beetles. Peace cracked along the benches, conversation stalled mid-sentence, cups hovering inches from mouths. A stroller wheel tapped a curb. Sarah whispered that maybe a squirrel had run between Lily and the grid. Tim said the dogs were reading something in the wind. The antique dealer's theory felt comfortable. The 8th graders sounded closer to the way the moment hummed. Lily turned her head. She did not retreat. The shepherds eased into position around her, shoulders square and eyes alive, not hostile, not hungry. Tails leveled into lines, chests rose and fell in patient sync. The ring left just enough space for a breath to move. Bennett strode forward with deliberate calm, boots biting the turf, mouth set. His hands translated the commands that had months of work behind them: stay, down, heel, play. The air received the words and changed nothing. Brows lifted along the benches. One teenager recorded with a phone held near a jacket to avoid drawing attention, as if the act were a delicate specimen. The bakery door opened and released a ribbon of sweetness that slipped into the field and complicated every simple thought. Lily raised her palm over the nearest head and paused. She had learned from books and from practice with patient cats that touch means more when permission is invited. The dog drew closer by the width of a breath, and offered the top of its skull as if laying down a question. Her fingers rested lightly in the fur, muscle undercoat softened, a tiny release that looked like the difference between bracing and listening. That change moved around the ring the way warmth travels through a line of hands. Jaws stayed closed, ears adjusted to a friendlier angle. Bennett quit the whistle and tried a low murmur reserved for Reese. The shepherds remained, anchored not by command, but by decision, forming a guard that felt like trust facing outward. People began to talk in the tone used in museums and newborn wards. Is she part of the program? Someone asked. Does she live with a trainer? Someone else wondered. Maybe the animals smell another dog on her clothes. A third voice proposed, and a fourth said no. This is different. The one-eared tabby crept closer, considered the circle, and arranged itself at Lily's heel with shameless calm, as if confident that no harm could cross that boundary. The teenager with the phone filmed the cat too. Bennett measured the ring, looked to risk, and chose stillness over interruption. His face, usually taut as a blueprint, opened just enough to show surprise tempered by calculation. He told a bystander to move people back 2 steps, not because danger had arrived, but because space gives nervous systems a place to settle. The request traveled down the benches in soft nudges. Parents drew kids to their knees for a better view while keeping small fingers away from Tim, trying to appear fearless and succeeding only partly, admitted to Sarah that the dogs looked gentle, not wild. Sarah admitted back that gentleness in such bodies was more arresting than ferocity. Over the water, a single-engine plane etched a pale line across blue, then drifted past, noise fading like an idea that had done its work. Lily whispered something simple, the kind of single word you use when greeting a friend you don't want to start. The lead dog answered by blinking long and slow, the mammal equivalent of a nod. Her hand slid to the ruff. Inside the ring, the light looked brighter, as if fur and shoulders had become a lens. Outside the ring, the town tried to redraw its map of how afternoons should be. Bennett breathed out, a metronome surrendering 1 beat to silence, and made a radio call that said everything was under control without saying anything at all about why. He had trained tracking, scent discrimination, bite inhibition, article search, and the 1,000 little hinge skills that add up to reliability, yet here was a scene no module had covered. He recognized it for what it was, a pattern the dogs considered higher priority. Not threat, not prey, not play, something closer to recognition or allegiance, or a word that hasn't been agreed upon yet. The park's everyday music resumed by degrees. A basketball thumped a court near the restrooms. A gull landed on a lamp. A breeze turned pages in a paperback someone had left splayed on a bench. Lily stayed where she was, small, steady, lit like a coin at the center of a compass. When she finally lowered her hand, the shepherd looked to her again before checking the horizon. The town exhaled. What remained was a story beginning to braid itself through a place that thought it had already heard every story a Tuesday could tell. A story about a child who loved animals, a trainer who trusted proof more than pride, 6 dogs whose discipline had made room for purpose, and a sunny park that would never be described as ordinary again. The German shepherds drew their circle tighter until the sunlight at Lily's shoes looked minted. A bright coin held by 6 steady bodies. Muscle arranged itself into a living rampart facing outward, paws firm, tails level, ears tuned to distance. Nothing snarled, nothing lunged. The posture said watch, not wound. Parents along the benches tensed. A paper cup cracked. Someone whispered, "Don't move." Officer Bennett walked forward with deliberate calm, shoulders squared, hands speaking the language that had shaped months of drills. "Heel," he said. No response. "Down." The air received the word, and returned only bird song. The ring matched Lily's slow inhale as if her lungs were a metronome. She stood sure, braid on her shoulder, eyes on the nearest brow. A teenager tilted a phone, pretending to scratch an ear while recording. Sarah from the antique shop touched the silver at her throat. Tim crouched by a trash can, by turns bold and scared. A rumor gusted through the benches, broken training, secret signals, bad omen, miracle. The shepherd closest to Lily slid an inch to give her more room, an adjustment so courteous it unsettled people more than a growl would have. Bennett tried again, voice lowered to velvet steel. "Place." The dogs held position and attention, not toward Lily but away from her, as though the world beyond the circle required management. The one-eared tabby took up station at Lily's ankle, tail wrapped neatly. A toddler cried, a mother swayed, the sprinkler ticked its patient arc. The bakery's door opened and sent warm cinnamon across the lawn, sweetness mixing with nerves so thoroughly the scent felt loud. Lily lifted her hand, waiting. The nearest head tipped toward her and offered question. Her palm met coarse warmth, and a small release moved through the ring like light down a row of windows. "They're guarding her," someone said. "From what?" another demanded. Bennett made himself still, instinct arguing with instinct. The whistle dangled, useless as jewelry. He spread his hands to the crowd. "Give them space." The semicircle shifted back a few paces, blankets and benches rearranging. With air restored, the ring tightened again, not squeezing ceiling. Paws thudded once, twice, then stilled. Tails became tidy dashes over muscled lines. Lily whispered, almost humming. The nearest ear flicked, then smooth. Another head dipped, slow, accepting. A gull perched on the lamppost like comic punctuation over solemn text. On the far edge of the park where apricot shade from old maples met bright grass, a figure in a cap paused. His stance was too careful for wandering, weight braced, attention slanting toward the ring while pretending to study water. Most eyes missed him. The scene at the center was gravity, yet the shepherd at Lily's left lifted its nose as if tasting an answer carried by the breeze. Subtle as a clock click, sightlines inside the circle, aligned to place that stranger within a quiet north. Sarah whispered Bennett's name. He didn't turn. Easy, he said, not to people, to the air between all living things. He tried a reset cue that often unfroze tension. Good hold. The animals kept their shape, reading perimeter rather than command. Tim slid closer, phone steady now, frame tight on fur, girl sunlight. The playground's laughter thinned. A ball nudged a curb, text messages jumped from cafe to hardware store, from porch to patrol car. A caption on one clip called the dogs angels with badges, another argued for science with bullet points and no oxygen. Lily kept her voice small and even, syllables meant for ears inches away. The ring softened without losing structure like stone brought to body temperature. Bennett tempted one more sequence. Sit, down, heel, each word clean, each refused without malice, the way a medic ignores paperwork during triage. He touched his radio, maintained hold, monitor perimeter. The mayor gestured to a volunteer, who drifted along the hedge with a pace designed to look like boredom. The man by the trees shifted, a hand entered a pocket, left it empty, the theater of nothing to hide. Two dogs let out a low thread of sound that people felt in their bones more than their ears. Those nearest stepped back without deciding to. Did you hear that? A boy asked. His mother only nodded. Lily moved her hand to another head, then another, tapping reassurance across the ring like a careful code. Muscle undercoat unraveled a notch. Kids who had pointed earlier went silent, startled by tenderness in frames built for force. Tim glanced at his own trembling thumbs on screen, and squeezed harder. The tabby yawned. A kite snagged high on a maple flickered like a heartbeat. The cap at the edge was adjusted again. The ring recalibrated by the same breath. Curtain closed. Child safe. Understanding lit behind Bennett's eye. The dogs were not ignoring him. They were prioritizing. He let the whistle hang, and chose trust over noise. You're doing fine, he told Lily, shaping courage to fit a voice a child could carry. She nodded without looking away. Her certainty widened the calm like varnish over wood. A breeze combed clover. A dragonfly stitched blue across the lakelet. A truck door slammed somewhere beyond the oaks. Heads turned. The stranger's posture sharpened. The dogs firmed. Nobody ran. In that taut quiet, even fear learned man. Skateboard wheels rattled, slowed, rolled away. A bicycle bell rang once, and I thought better of it. Sunlight slid along badges, then warmed Lily's cheek. The ring looked ceremonial, as if an unseen authority had issued medals where collars lay. People copied the animals without knowing, shoulders down, feet planted, eyes outward. The news cycle small-town version spun faster than any siren. Aunties texted nephews, nephews texted group chats, and the bakery posted a careful note about patience and respect. The volunteer reached the hedge end, and stood with arms folded like a fence post that could move if required. The man in the cap took 2 backward steps, then 1 forward, testing lines the dogs had drawn without paint. 2 shepherds answered with weight shifts that said, "We see you." Lily's whispering continued, patient and patterned. The animals matched her pattern like harmony. Bennett weighed interruption against evidence and let evidence win. Training could demand obedience, leadership could demand wisdom. This afternoon I wanted both, plus humility. He swallowed pride like medicine and kept his tone even. Good hold. The ring replied by remaining supple and strong. A cloud crossed the sun and moved on. Shadows lapped the grass and retreated. The crowd's panic cooled into watchfulness taught by example. A little boy waved at Lily. One ear of the tabby rotated to acknowledge him. The dogs did not blink. The stranger in the cap retreated another pace, and pretended to check his watch. The volunteer mirrored him from the hedge, ready to close the distance if reason demanded. Through it all, Lily stayed where she was as a candle, bright as one too. Her hand rose, fell, Rose fell, rhythm familiar as reading aloud to a hamster at home. The animals breathed with her and the town learned how. Have you ever felt a connection so deep it changed everything? Think about what trust means to you. A low growl braided from 6 throats turned the park's chatter into hush. The man under the maples flinched beneath his cap and pretended to study the lakelet, but tension sat square across his shoulders. The German shepherds angled outward around Lily, paws set, ears cutting toward shade, bodies steady as if the ground itself had asked them to hold. Officer Bennett read the shift like wind and flicked 2 fingers toward Mayor Thompson without taking his eyes off the edge. 2 community officers in plain windbreakers eased along the hedge with palms open and voices tuned to cool rather than stir. Parents drew back a step, a stroller squeaked, then stilled, phones lifted. Lily kept her touch slow under ear along rough, light on lighter off, until the ring's breath matched hers. Heel, Bennett said. Down. The circle kept its post, not defiant, simply ranking duties with the child first. The nearer officer greeted the stranger. Words came sticky, a smile missed its target. The second officer took a diagonal that sheltered the crowd and asked for hands where everyone could see. The stranger complied too fast, then almost reversed, catching himself with a jerk. A soft shh passed along the benches. Sarah pressed a locket to her collarbone. Tim steadied his lens. The growl dropped half an octave when the man shifted again, enough to make ankles think about stepping back. Bennett floated his palm a degree, a micro cue that held the ring tight and still. Tails hovered like dashes over quiet strength. Name, the officer asked. Late, address, wrong, then edited. Remembering a loiterer warned away from the schoolyard this week, the officer watched pupils pinch at the mention and felt coincidence snap. Permission to conduct a quick safety check was requested with courtesy and a patient explanation. The stranger nodded with theatrical goodwill. A folded map, a torn receipt and a worn fishing brochure surfaced. Then a mismatched inside seam drew attention, puckered where its twin ran smooth. Gentle fingers found a taped flap hiding a rigid sleeve. Out slid a narrow steel rod with a knurled grip, no longer than a forearm and built for harm. Parents inhaled together. A toddler cried and was gathered to a shoulder where a soft song began. The officers stepped back half a pace, voiced what they had found, and guided the stranger to face a maple. He obeyed with reluctance that stopped short of a struggle. Cuffs clicked. A sound like wind in grain rolled across the lawn. Not cheers, not jeers. Only the long exhale communities make when risk leaves on a short leash. Bennett remained where he was because he had asked the ring to hold, and leadership sometimes means obeying your own order. The dogs eased the growl to silence while keeping attention taut as wire. Lily's palm never rushed. Light tracked across polished coats. Muscles softened a notch, yet readiness stayed under the E. Mayor Thompson looked at the confiscated rod, nodded to the officers and then let his eyes settle on the circle that had refused panic. Whispers recalibrated around the rail. The animals had guarded the child, not threatened her. They had read what people had known. Tim's video caught Steele meeting daylight in his own quiet gasp. Sarah lowered her hand and said gentleness had never looked so strong. Bennett keyed his radio to mark the unknown as contained and thanked the officers with a small motion. He crouched at 3 yards so he would not tower. You did perfectly, he told Lily and the dogs together. In a moment, I'll ask them to come with me, all right. Lily nodded once. Ask kindly, she said, and parents near the rail released a laugh they had been saving. He tried with me, palm open, voice warm. 2 dogs leaned toward him. 4 held until Lily lifted her fingers in a small go-on gesture. The crescent widened and made a lane. He stepped in, offered a hand for scent, scratched a crest with respect rather than ownership, and the ring loosened without breaking. A patrol car nosed through the service gate. The officers walked the stranger toward it, cap dangling from fingers that had lost their script. The local paper opened a live update, careful with tone and facts, careful to write that no one was hurt because living beings listen to signals most of us ignore. Meanwhile, the park learned itself again. Sprinklers ticked. A soccer ball found a game. The bakery bell chimed. Bennett let a brief laugh slip, the sound of tension stepping off stage. He looked at Lily. You okay? She nodded. They knew. He believed that because belief had already settled in his body before his mind caught up. He rubbed a brow, then addressed the gathered family. "Thank you for staying calm." Mayor Thompson thanked the officers, recognized the animals as partners, and said the town would remember the afternoon not because fear visited, but because courage held the door. Applause rose carefully, gathered strength and rolled under the oak. The dogs flicked their ears, accepted the sound and stood taller. Lily whispered again, "Syllables are simple and private." Chests eased, tongues touched teeth, and withdrew. The arc relaxed another inch. Sarah slid her locket beneath her collar and decided she would walk past the training field with a kinder eye. The paper noted that a concealed instrument designed to harm had been removed and that charges would be evaluated after a full report, then signed off with a sentence about sunlight, dogs and the quiet heroism of a steady voice. Bennett straightened and whistled a softer pattern, one paired with gratitude during long weeks of practice. "Good hold," he said. "Thank you." The dogs waited for Lily's eyes, then flowed beside him like a tide that still kept the child within a calm arc. The patrol car turned toward me. The hedge released a breath. The town's pulse slowed. Across the square a breeze lifted chalk dust into tiny constellations and set a stranded kite tail flickering. Lily squeezed the nearest ear and smiled without showing teeth. "Walk?" she asked. Bennett nodded. They moved along the path with the dogs gliding as guards and companions, sunlight washing backs and badges while countless small screens stitched their story outward. Within minutes, short clips leapt from chat threads to town pages and out across wider feeds, gathering views by thousands. Captions repeated the same idea in different ways: 6 partners, 1 brave child, a trainer who trusted proof. The bakery's doorway angle showed the ring like a living emblem. The paper's live post pinned updates and asked readers to keep the park respectful. A school account shared a still of Lily's hand resting on a brow with a line about kindness having weight. Neighbors texted relatives, relatives texted friends, and the story threaded itself through people who had never heard of this place. An hour earlier, none of that noise touched the center. Lily kept breathing, the dogs kept watch, and the town felt its shoulders lower as relief replaced dread. Morning carried last night's astonishment quietly into every doorway. The bakery sold out of cinnamon nuts, because people wanted the same scent that hung in the air when 6 German shepherds formed a living wall around a quiet child. Screens replayed the ring from many angles, comments layering gratitude, wonder and disbelief. Names traveled with the light: Lily, Officer Bennett, Mayor Thompson, volunteers, officers who found a hidden rod stitched into a seam. Neighbors who rarely visited the park detoured there just to stand where calm had prevailed. By mid-morning Tim waited near the antique shop with a cup of cocoa bought with pocket change, hoping to hand it to Lily as an apology without saying the word. He had nudged her desk before, now his voice kept catching because real courage made teasing look small. Sarah polished her windows, then opened early so people could lean on the counter and recount their fear as it drained away. Everyone repeated the same detail first. The dog's stillness looked deliberate, language spoken with bodies. Clara and James reached the park with quick steps and uneven breaths, hearts counting every siren they had heard on the way, even though none belonged to this story. They found Lily beside training cones with Bennett kneeling to eye level and the shepherds in a relaxed half circle as if attending class. Clara pulled her close and checked for marks that weren't there. James rubbed his forehead, palms smelling of sawdust and oil. "We came as soon as we could," he said. "I'm all right," Lily answered. They listened. Her palm rested on a warm brow. The animal leaned in as if understanding. Clara met Bennett's eyes. "Is this safe?" "We're going to make it so," he said, voice less iron, more humility. "Your daughter has a gift I don't train. I can shape skills she carries trust." The mayor arrived with a soft word and a firmer promise. The town would review protocols, thank the officers publicly, and keep curiosity respectful. Families stayed back, yet the pull to witness gentleness drew them near. Tim finally stepped forward, cheeks hot, offering the cocoa with both hands. "For you," he said. Lily accepted and thanked him, as simple as setting 2 sticks so a spark could land. Bennett faced Clara and James. "I'd like to invite Lily to the training grounds," he said. "Controlled environment, short exercises, nothing risky. I want to see what the dogs perceive when she's present, and I want her to feel how a working team moves." James weighed the ask the way he weighs lumber, searching grain for hidden twists. Clara listened to their daughter breathing. They looked at each other, then at Lily, then at the animals whose eyes held patience. "If she feels safe," Clara said. "I do," Lily replied. Word outran announcements. By the time Bennett's truck rolled through the gate at the edge of town, neighbors had found reasons to be nearby. The grounds stretched along the prairie where fences traded places with the wind. Cones, hurdles, scent boxes, a mock storefront, and a chalk circle made a tidy map of purpose. The shepherds leapt down, shook once, and trotted to heel in a line neat as a ruler. "We'll start with presents," Bennett said. "Stand where you like, I'll cue a standard walk." Lily chose a spot beside the circle and folded her hands. "Forward," Bennett called. Paws landed like quiet drums. They reached the first cone, pivoted cleanly, and then, as if a tide pulled sideways, broke formation and arced toward Lily. "Hold," Bennett said, giving the word most likely to catch. Ears flicked, shoulders dipped, pace slowed, intention stayed. They arranged themselves around her, respectful and sure. He exhaled a surprised laugh that admitted admiration overrode pride. They made their choice. Lily touched one head, then another. The air around the ring felt warmer, like a room where a fire had just been kindled. Clara blinked back tears. James pressed knuckles to his mouth. "They aren't disobeying," Bennett said to the gathered volunteers. "They're prioritizing proximity to what matters." He softened his posture and gave a fresh cue. "Stay with Lily." 6 tails lowered, 6 chests found the same rhythm. A reporter stayed far back, capturing the way sunlight pooled at Lily's shoes, and made the coats look burning. Earlier clips had already drawn messages from towns 2 valleys over, and a retired handler who wrote that sometimes a bond arrives before names, and the best thing you can do is honor it. Bennett proposed a short walk. "We'll follow her pace." Lily stepped. The dogs matched without touching her toes, each finding a place where protection and courtesy could share the same inch. They passed hurdles, a tunnel, a row of decoys, and a scent line. None of the usual targets mattered. Only Lily. Neighbors moved like a tide along the fence, careful not to crowd. Sarah left a paper sack of orange slices on a table as a peace offering. Tim carried cups from a cooler, remembering to serve adults first, then kids, then himself. The town's rhythm sounded different, quieter, not because people were silent, but because listening had become fashionable. Clara and James walked on either side of the circle where they could see every face and measure safety with their own eyes. "We're okay," Clara murmured. James squeezed Lily's free hand. "Proud of you," he said. Bennett led them to the mock storefront. "One short station," he said. "If this feels wrong, we end immediately." He placed a metal key behind a planter, then signaled the team. The dogs didn't budge until Lily lifted her fingers. Then they moved, not rushing, each choosing a quadrant, noses working, tails balanced. The one nearest the door glanced at her, angled left, sniffed, and sat by the planter without touching it. Bennett laughed outright delight. "Textbook indication," he said, without a handler cue beyond presence. Applause fluttered like birds rising from brush. Lily looked brighter, not taller, just more certain in the space she occupied. Clara exhaled long. James dropped his hand and finally smiled. Even the mayor let his shoulders rest. The rest of the hour passed in small demonstrations shaped by consent, slow weaving, brief halts, a gentle greeting with a younger child who adored dogs but feared noise. The shepherds responded to Lily's calm like tuning forks to pit. When it ended, Bennett thanked the family and told onlookers that remarkable days ask for discipline tomorrow. "We'll set boundaries, keep routines, and treat the animals like partners, not props," he said. "We're lucky to learn from what happened." Tim, flushed and sincere, asked Lily how to stand so a nervous dog doesn't feel crowded. She showed him. He tried it. A grin found his mouth when the nearest head leaned instead of pulling away. The sun tilted west. Shadows lengthened over chalk lines. Wind shifted cool. Lily hugged each shepherd in turn, not rushing, simply sealing a promise. As the family turned homeward, chatter regained sparkle, yet a soft hush threaded through it, the kind that follows a hymn after the last note. Have you ever been misunderstood, only to find your strength? Reflect on your hidden gifts. Morning light washed the training grounds in soft gold while fences drew long shadows over clipped grass, and Officer Bennett arranged cones, scent tins, hurdles, and a mock storefront with exactness. Lily arrived between Clara and James, braid neat, sneakers dusty, eyes bright. The 6 German shepherds lifted their heads the moment she stepped from the truck, Callers jingled once, then stilled as if they were waiting for a cue only she could give. Bennett briefed the small crowd that had drifted in. Short demonstrations, no risk, parental consent, respect for space. He reminded everyone that working dogs read posture and breath, then asked Lily to stand wherever she felt comfortable. She chose a spot near a chalk circle, hands at her sides, expression calm. To start, Bennett cued a standard heel, forward. The line moved, pause finding one rhythm. Left, bodies curved, down. Instead of dropping, 6 heads turned toward Lily. She raised 2 fingers at her waist, a tiny gesture. The entire team folded to their elbows as one, eyes soft, breaths even. Bennett tried place, and pointed to padded squares near the storefront. Muzzles tracked his hand, then flicked to Lily. She walked 3 steps to the mats, paused, and the line shadowed that choice, settling exactly on the squares as if the ground itself had spoken. He added mild distractions, a rolling ball, a metal clack, a shaker tin. Under ordinary pressure the team would brace. Near Lily they downgraded stimulus without strain. Ears moved, shoulders stayed relaxed, jaws remained loose. When she drew a small circle in the air above a nearest head, energy smooth as if a hand had ironed creases from cloth. The difference was visible even to first-time watchers, attentive without strain, confident without edge. For a scent trial, Bennett placed 3 tins along a chalked arc, then palmed a cotton swab touched with clove and hid it under the middle lid. He issued the search cue. The team looked to Lily. She tipped her wrist toward the arc. 2 dogs cast wide, 2 cut narrow, 2 split the center, and within seconds the leftmost sat beside the correct tin without a tap. Lily gave a quiet praise word. Tails made small, satisfied commas. Bennett grinned despite himself. Indication clean, he said to the mayor, who nodded like someone seeing a compass point true. Along the rope, neighbors filmed with care, narrating in soft voices so their own awe wouldn't shake the camera. Moving to the storefront, Bennett swept an arm. Approach, hold. The pack waited for Lily's intent. She opened both hands, palms forward. They advanced as a shallow shield, then halted at a courteous distance. Another small gesture brought them back to her side in a smooth curve that left a crescent of space at her feet. The crowd breathed together. Bennett tucked the whistle into his pocket and stopped giving voice commands entirely, preferring to observe what language lived in Lily's hands. Clara watched every detail, protective and alert. James watched too and saw something softer. Lily's shoulders loose, chin level, happiness showing without effort. Mayor Thompson stepped closer to the rope and spoke with the care of someone placing a glass on a full table. Officer, Clara James, what would you think about a partnership? Not employment, not pressure, but a formal role for Lily as a junior partner in our K-9 program. We can write guardrails, keep school first and review every step with you. I know it's unusual, yet it seems the dogs have already made their choice. The murmur that followed held more hope than doubt. Clara answered first, protective. She wanted to understand risks, limits, supervision, hours, and who would say stop when stop needed saying. James added that he needed to honor what he was seeing because their daughter looked lighter here, not escaping fear but standing in trust. Bennett outlined the safest path he could imagine: short sessions, parental presence, no deployments, only demonstrations and low-intensity exercises, with immediate stop authority in Clara's hand. He would rewrite protocols, schedule a meeting with council, and teach crowds how to behave around working animals and children. The mayor agreed, promising transparency. Volunteers nodded. The plan felt like stewardship. To test one more layer, Bennett tapped his boot and spun a finger for a quick pattern. He spoke 3 crisp words: heel, left, back. The team watched Lily. She lifted her forefinger and drew a soft S near her. 6 bodies mirrored that path, without brushing her shoes, then parked in a curved line. She opened her palm and lowered it an inch. The team sank to elbows, heads up, breathing slow. Bennett tossed a tug past her ankle. A dog tracked it, checked her face and let the toy fall still. Cameras caught that restraint and the quiet delight that moved through people like warmth. Bennett added a recall from behind a hurdle. Lily stepped into view and gave a tiny beckon. The line flowed to her, each animal choosing a lane that preserved space and safety. A final exercise placed a teen volunteer inside a cone circle as a stand-in for a nervous bystander. Lily led the team in a wide orbit, palm low, wrist turning gently to keep space generous. The silhouettes looked like calm punctuation marks protecting a softer scent. When the circuit ended, the teen exhaled and said the air had felt kinder beside Lily. That remark convinced more than any speech. Bennett closed the session with water and rest. Bowls emptied. They drifted back to Lily and settled within arm's reach, choosing her quiet over cooler air. Coats gleamed, tongues tucked, eyelids softened, posture carried the ease of companionship rather than duty. Phones lowered at last, because nobody wanted to look away from something gentler than video could capture at last. As noon heat thickened, Bennett gathered cones and thanked everyone for their patience. He turned to Clara and James. "We move only as fast as your comfort," he said. Clara cupped Lily's face and promised they would talk with teachers and doctors. Then James tucked a stray hair behind his daughter's ear, and admitted he had not seen her this happy in a long time. The mayor promised a public forum, clear guidelines and an invitation for questions. Tim approached with 2 paper cups of lemonade, offered one to Lily, and asked how to stand so a cautious dog felt welcome. She showed him a gentle angle and a slower breath. The nearest head leaned in and closed its eyes. James laughed softly. Clara's worry loosened another knot. Bennett looked over the field and understood that every drill had just been repainted by a child's steady kindness. He read tomorrow's work in that image, policies rewritten, sessions shortened, boundaries taught, audiences guided, and a new kind of partner whose gift turned power into calm. As people drifted away, the pack stayed near Lily, less like soldiers off duty than friends resting after a clear task. Even the wind seemed to slow as it crossed the prairie, as if taking care not to disturb the shape of trust around a small girl and 6 patient guardians. Truly remarkable. Afternoon warmth lay over Maple Street when a fresh alert rippled through town. A crossing guard reported a man lingering by the elementary fence, jacket zipped to the throat, though the day felt mild, gaze skating from backpack to backpack without acknowledging any child. The warning shot across parent threads reached the patrol channel and hummed beneath shop talk like a low drum. Clara read the message twice, fear tickling her ribs. James squeezed her hand and kept pace toward the library lawn where Lily and Officer Bennett had planned a short walk with the 6 German shepherds after drills. Wind combed chalk dust into pale ribbons along the curb. A teacher guided a line toward the annex, counting softly under breath. Lily walked beside the dogs at an easy rhythm, fingertips brushing fur now and then as if reminding the world that kindness can be measured, not declared. 3 blocks from the school, the team slowed without command. Noses lifted, ears edged forward, shoulders settled into readiness that looked almost ceremonial. Lily paused. The formation flowed around her and widened to include 2 smaller kids trailing a babysitter, placing those little bodies inside a sheltered pocket of afternoon light. The babysitter's eyes shone, her whisper sounded like prayer. Bennett lifted his hand in the prearranged signal for hold and scanned ahead. Half a block beyond the crosswalk, a man leaned against a utility pole and pretended to read a flyer, cap brim low, shoes aimed toward the ramp, weight rocking as if deliberation had a heartbeat. A neighbor watering geraniums noticed the way his shoulders fixed, and with quiet certainty called the non-emergency line to share what she saw. The dogs tightened the arc, no lunge, no spectacle, only the clarity of purpose written in spine and stance. A low thread of sound braided from 6 throats and stopped just above a growl, enough to turn chatter into hush. Parents near the corner drifted back 2 paces. A bicycle bell clipped itself short. The teacher paused the line and shortened the route with a finger to lips, easing children toward the annex door while leaving space for officers to work. Bennett kept his tone level. "Sir," he called, open palms visible, "hold right there please." The man lifted the flyer again, let it snap back, then peeled it away as though evaluation required drama, not reading. A smile that never touched his eyes arrived late and left early. "Just waiting," he said, voice light, words flowed. Even while he talked, his gaze searched the gap near the curb where the babysitter stood with the small pair inside the dog's crescent. The shepherd on Lily's left placed one heavy paw forward and pressed it, carving a bright boundary in dust, tails leveled, chests deepened. The pack faced outward as gates, not teeth. Lily laid her palm on the nearest head and whispered once, syllables soft as breath. The tension inside the ring eased without losing shape, ears stayed canted toward the street. Mayor Thompson's sedan eased to the curb a car length back. He stepped out and stood near the library steps, watchful without adding noise. Tim lifted his phone, framing it wide so the scene showed context, not just fear. Sarah folded her hands at her collarbone and kept still. A cruiser turned the corner with lights on and siren off. The neighbor with the hose lifted 2 fingers toward the pole to guide the officer's eyes. Doors opened. An officer crossed with calm economy and greeted everyone at a volume that carried without fraying nerves. Afternoon, we received a call about unusual behavior near a school. Sir, can we talk? The man said he was waiting for a friend, could not recall the name, said a bus schedule had blown away, and he was checking the board for times even though the schedule hung behind glass. While he spoke, his feet kept angling toward the smallest child with the sky blue backpack and a fresh bandage on the knee. Bennett did not advance. He waited, posture square, radio live. The officer asked the man to place his hands on the pole for a quick safety check. A beat stretched long enough to hear a crow cross the field, then a shrug, a slow turn, palms on sun-warmed metal. The pat-down revealed a rigid tube tucked inside the jacket seam, narrow, knurled, shaped for harm and hidden by careful stitch. The officer removed it with steady hands and spoke evenly for those within earshot. Prohibited tool recovered. We'll continue this at the station. The man stiffened as if choosing between performance and compliance, then sagged into cuffs with a mutter about misunderstanding. The growl in the ring faded the instant Risk began to leave the street. Lily stroked a brow, then another, repeating the same gentle path between ears down the ridge. Pause, withdraw, muscle softened under fur, breathing aligned, ears stayed forward because duty had not yet released them. The babysitter wiped her eyes with the back of a wrist, and made a shaky joke about owing the whole team popsicles. 2 kids laughed because the room for laughter had reopened. The cruiser rolled away without hurry. Mayor Thompson thanked the neighbor for calling, thanked the officer for measured work, thanked parents for keeping distance, then looked at Bennett and said, "Your team did exactly what we hoped they would do, protection without panic." Bennett nodded but kept the ring intact until the corner swallowed the car. Only then did he open one hand in a small release. The arc loosened by inches, never losing contact with Lily's position, never inviting carelessness. Clara reached them at a half-trot, breath high, James close behind. She touched Lily's cheek, checked her knees, checked her shoulders, checked the quiet that lived in her daughter's eyes. "I'm okay," Lily said, calmer than proud. They knew. James laid a palm on a wither and felt the slow confidence there. His shoulders came down as if someone had lifted a weight from the day. Around them sentences resumed where fear had cut them, though the cadence felt changed. Sarah told the small group that strength drawn from kindness is better than strength drawn from noise. Tim lowered his phone because memory sometimes deserves the last frame. The teacher finished the count and guided the class inside. A librarian rolled out a cart of paperbacks for the after-school crowd and set a small saucer of water beneath a bench without comment. The dogs stayed close to Lily even after the street went quiet again, less like soldiers returning from a post, and more like friends lingering after a hard hour to be sure silence meant safety, not pause. Bennett walked the edge of the group and saw understanding pass between neighbors the way shade passes over grass, visible if you look. "We'll debrief," he told the mayor. Tighten signage, reinforce crowd distance, document cues that work. The mayor agreed, promising a forum with staff and families so people could learn how to share space with working teams. Clara listened, still protective, but a line of tension at her mouth eased when she watched Lily rest a palm on a brow, and felt the crowd steady around that touch. James exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding, and asked if they could move to the library lawn. Bennett nodded. The pack flowed in a crescent that kept passers-by outside and left a small island of light around the child they had chosen to center. On the grass, Lily read a page from a favorite book in a clear voice, and the dogs folded into a loose semicircle whose softness felt like an answer rather than a collapse. People kept quiet out of respect for the ordinary peace restored. What would you do to protect those you love? Think about the courage in small moments. Town hall filled before sundown, chairs lined in borrowed rows, windows cracked for a soft breeze, and a hush of steady gratitude replaced the jittery talk that had followed every alert. Mayor Thompson welcomed families, shopkeepers, teachers, and the crew from the bakery who carried a tray of cinnamon nuts because the scent had become part of the town's new story. He kept his remarks short, promising time for questions later, then waved Officer Bennett to the small dais. Bennett stood without ceremony and looked out at faces he knew by first name, the crossing guard who noticed everything, the librarian who collected calm, the contractor who repaired fences before storms, the teenager who filmed without chasing chaos. He cleared his throat and said the most important lesson of the week was simple. Their program worked because of training, but its spirit turned on trust. He described how the dogs had chosen a posture beyond drills, how they oriented around a child who met the world with listening rather than noise, how restraint could be stronger than spectacle. He said Lily's presence made the team gentler without losing edge, and that truth humbled him more than any commendation. He told the room that the town's safety did not come from control alone. It came from relationships between handlers and partners, between neighbors who looked out for one another, between a small voice and 6 patient guardians. He paused, then added that the new procedures born from 2 tense afternoons would honor those relationships. He would formalize crowd lines with clearer signs, rehearse quiet holds for community events, schedule open trainings so families could see how cues travel from breath to paw, and write a policy that centered consent. Phones did not rise, eyes did. He thanked the neighbor who called in the second report near the school and the officer who spoke with calm clarity while recovering a concealed tool. He thanked the teacher who shortened a route without breaking children's confidence, and the volunteer who kept curiosity from smothering space. When he finished, he stepped aside and invited the mayor to present a resolution. Thompson unfolded a single page, a steady voice carrying to the back wall. The town, he read, wished to recognize a daughter of this place for courage, steadiness and uncommon kindness, and to honor the 6 canine partners, whose instincts protected lives without injury or panic. He called Lily forward. Chairs creaked, people stood, the sound felt less like cheering and more like a shared breath. Lily walked with Clara and James. The dogs rose from the aisle and drifted after her in a calm half-circle, sitting the moment she stopped, leaving a crescent of clear floor so she had room. Heads lifted, ears angled, eyes soft. A photographer from the paper crouched low, taking care not to crowd. The mayor handed Lily a ribboned folder and spoke to her, the way one speaks to a peer. "Thank you for trusting us while we learn to trust you." He pinned a small pin shaped like a paw inside a shield to her backpack strap and pinned a matching badge to Bennett's sleeve. Someone set a wooden water stand by the front row. Bowls clinked once, then quieted as tongues met the surface. Bennett returned to the microphone and said what he had rehearsed and what he had not. He admitted that he had wanted commands to solve every riddle and had been wrong. He said this week proved that steadiness begins before speech and that Lily's gift belonged to the town as a reminder, not a tool. He outlined a proposal already drafted. Lily would join demonstrations as a junior partner with strict guardrails, no deployments, short sessions, parental presence, and absolute stop authority in Clara's hands. He promised ongoing evaluations with teachers and the pediatrician, clear communication with the school, and a public forum to answer questions about working animals and consent. He asked the community to mirror the dog's best habits, leave space, watch the edges, breathe before act. Applause rose, not loud, just certain. Lily sat on the step while the dogs arranged themselves like punctuation around a sentence, still but alert, showing by posture that loyalty could be quiet. Kids gathered on the floor. Tim, cheeks warm, slid into place beside her and murmured an apology without dressing it up. Lily tilted her head and said, "Thank you for the cocoa yesterday." He smiled with relief that looked like daylight. Sarah brought a small bouquet of wildflowers in a jam jar and set it near the water stand. The crossing guard lifted a thumb from the back row. The paper's editor, usually spare with adjectives, scribbled one word 3 times, "Grace." Questions followed. A father asked whether people could practice the stance that says welcome without pressure. Bennett demonstrated a relaxed angle, hands at sides, shoulders soft, eyes on the dog's chest instead of the face. A mother asked how to explain restraint to children who only know dramatic clips. The librarian offered a reading list about empathy, working teams and how patience can be heroic. A retired handler spoke from the third row about bonds that begin before names and invited everyone to honor mystery without pretending it must be explained to be real. Clara thanked the room for believing her daughter when she said the dogs listened. She said Lily had always watched small signals, a whisker twitch, a tail flick, a shoe tapping, and had learned to speak in quieter ways because quiet things listened back. James said relief had arrived in stages, and that tonight felt like the first hour where gratitude outweighed worry. The mayor announced that a shade canopy would be added near the training field, that placards with large type would mark safe watching zones, and that monthly open sessions would give families a place to practice calm together. He asked the bakery to keep bringing cinnamon knots because they worked better than speeches. Laughter loosened the room. The dogs shifted only to rest their chins on paws. Lily traced the edge of one ear with a single fingertip and a ripple of ease moved through 6 bodies like one. She read a page from a book about loyalty at Tim's quiet request, voice level, tempo even, lifting at the end of questions. The sound steadied everyone. A teacher near the door dabbed a corner of tissue and then laughed at her. When the formal part ended, the line to offer thanks formed without pushing. People spoke in low tones, made requests carefully, and left when faces grew glossy or the dogs blinked slowly. Bennett stepped back and let the moment belong to the child and the partners who had chosen her. The editor took one more photo, Lily between 2 shepherds, parents close, Bennett a pace behind, Mayor to the side and a cluster of kids sitting cross-legged like stones around a sapling. Outside, dusk gilded the square. The bakery handed out a last tray. The library set a cart of animal stories under the porch. The crossing guard waved even though her shift had ended hours earlier. Streetlights hummed awake. A breeze carried clover and cinnamon through the entrance as the doors opened for air. Nothing dramatic happened, which felt like triumph. That was the change the town recognized. Safety had begun to feel ordinary because kindness had become common. As dusk deepened, small groups crossed the lawn talking about habits they could change. Softer greetings for anxious pets, clearer lines during events, slower horns near crosswalks and a promise to look up from screens when something felt wrong. The clerk taped guidance on the bulletin board in plain language so kids could read it with their grandparents. A student volunteer collected questions for the forum and added a note about writing thank you messages for first responders. The bakery set out an extra tray to steady nerves still quick from memory. Neighbors who seldom shared more than nods swapped phone numbers. The librarian promised a display about animal communication, empathy and safety. A contractor offered a shade canopy for the training field, while a print shop owner donated bold placards for crowd lines. Mayor Thompson moved without hurry, listening more than speaking, jotting notes that would become tomorrow's checklist. Bennett crouched to water bowls, then sat on the lowest step and watched Lily accept gratitude without shrinking or basking. Clara answered practical questions about bedtime after hard days and how to teach patience without scolding. James described relief arriving in stages, like light crossing a room. Tim told Sarah he would help at the next demonstration, not for a clip, but to learn how to care for space. She squeezed his shoulder and said, "Growth looks like that." By full dark the square glowed with porchlight warmth, and the air felt changed in a way no ordinance could achieve. Lily rose, thanked everyone for listening, and walked toward the truck with the dogs clustered loosely, close enough to show loyalty, loose enough to prove comfort. People stayed a moment longer, facing one another instead of screens, making promises out loud so memory would keep them honest. Have you ever seen kindness change a heart? Consider how one act can ripple outward. Each new morning, the town woke to a steadier rhythm, as if porch lights, crosswalk chirps and school bells had agreed on a calmer beat. Lily walked the park path with 6 German shepherds flowing beside her like a quiet tide, each wearing a new leather collar stamped with brass plates that read Guardians of the Town. Neighbors waved without crowding. Kids lifted open palms and angled bodies so space felt kind, and shopkeepers set water bowls by doorways the way they once put out flowers. The bakery kept cinnamon knots near the window because that scent now meant relief. The librarian stacked animal tales and picture books about empathy beneath a sign that said stories grow best where patience lives. Clips still traveled, drawing visitors who came not for spectacle but to stand where calm held and to thank a child whose voice steadied an anxious week. Officer Bennett adjusted schedules so demonstrations happened often enough to teach and seldom enough to turn partners into props. Clara watched with care, stepping in when faces leaned too close, stepping back when learning looked respectful. James repaired rails, oiled latches, and laughed more easily because worry no longer lived in his shoulders. Tim volunteered at open sessions, holding a sign that read "Give working teams room," then showing smaller kids how to breathe slower and turn slightly so greetings felt safe. Sarah arranged a small shelf with a donation jar for a shade canopy, another jar of vintage buttons for children to trade, and a clipping that called the dog's teachers and Lily a listener whose gift turned strength into welcome. Every afternoon the team traced a loop from the field to the square and back, moving like punctuation through ordinary sentences. Sometimes they paused by the mock storefront so visiting classes could watch restraint, sometimes they sat under oaks while Lily read a page aloud, tempo even, questions lifted at the end so answers had a place to land. Neighbors began to measure success by quiet moments rather than numbers. A stroller rolling past without startle, wheels slowing near the curb, a family pet lowering its head instead of barking because the circle's calm seemed contagious. Sun lit the brass plates without flash, duty kept its peace. Visitors took photos from the rope line and left notes on the board thanking volunteers for teaching them how to watch without swallowing space. The paper ran a feature that did not call Lily a prodigy or a miracle, only a child who listened and partners who stood where listening led. Bennett said training works, yet something older moved through those afternoons, and his job was to protect that quiet, not claim it. Clara tucked the article into a cookbook because she liked courage filed among recipes, a reminder that steadiness can be prepared, served, and shared. James built a bench from reclaimed planks, sanding edges until splinters had nowhere to hide, then burned a line along the back rail. Trust grows where care repeats. Traffic near the school slowed without new signs because nobody wanted to be the reason a siren cut daylight. The crossing guard held up a hand like a conductor bringing horns to rest, and cars obeyed because the town had chosen a tempo that left room for thought. Not every hour glowed, and honesty became part of the story too. A toddler once darted toward the rope. A parent caught a shirt hem and apologized before worry could bloom. A teenager tested the edge with a showy whistle, then pocketed noise when the nearest shepherd turned a polite ear without moving a paw. Small corrections gathered weight until they formed a habit, and the habit made room for grace. Lily's shyness thinned like fog in late sun, not because she learned to shout but because she stopped hiding the way she seemed. She greeted neighbors by name, asked after tomatoes, taught a scout troop how to meet a nervous animal, and waved at visitors who had driven hours just to be quiet by the fence. At home, Pip still received chapters and the one-eared tabby patrolled the porch accepting ear scratches from partners whose noses were usually busy with other assignments. People kept asking why the dogs chose Lily. She would shrug, then say they simply listened together the way crickets sing without deciding who starts. Children accepted that answer more easily than adults, which taught the adults something useful about explanation and wonder. Letters arrived from far towns describing how a clip about 6 partners circling a small girl had sparked kinder habits in parks and markets. An elementary class mailed drawings of bright collars and a big ring of wagging tails around stick-figure kids. A bakery 2 ridges over copied the cinnamon knot idea and pledged part of next month's sales to rescue groups. The librarian kept a map with a string to show how far the story had traveled, not to brag but to remind visitors that simple acts sometimes ripple beyond sight. Evenings brought silhouettes across the square, teenagers choosing laughter over dares, elders showing grandchildren how to tie sturdy knots and how to hold a gate so a passerby can cross with hands free. The dogs rested near Lily's knees, eyes half closed, heads rising only when bicycles clipped the edge or voices spiked. They looked less like sentries than friends who remember when to stand and when to nap. People learned names one by one and wrote them under snapshots with kids. Bennett kept logs, refreshed protocols, and reminded crowds that working teams thrive when boundaries are honored. He smiled more easily, as if the week that began with fear had loaned him a softer pair of boots. Clara and James set routines that balanced school, rest, play, and sessions, and they said no often enough that yes continued to mean something. By late season, visitors arrived less for spectacle and more for practice. They came to learn a stance, a breath, a way of meeting a day that keeps edges smooth. Some left with new habits, the way travelers leave with recipes promising to return with friends. A muralist painted the wall across from the field, Lily reading beneath an oak, 6 companions forming a crescent, a sunburst behind them, and along the bottom the collar words lettered by students with steady hands. Under that arc, kids swapped stickers for chores well done, friends solved small arguments with slower voices, and strangers started conversations with fewer assumptions. The question never vanished: why her? Why them? Why them? The town agreed to keep wondering without solving the mystery until it broke. A scientist suggested sensitive systems sometimes sync like metronomes on a shared shelf. A poet said trust leaps where attention stays true. The crossing guard said eyes matter, posture matters, and cookies for helpers never hurt. All 3 answers found a place on the library board because none canceled the others. Lily understood only that presence carries weight when it stays kind, and the dogs seemed to agree. On a soft evening after a chain of small victories, the loop ended with shadows lengthening and porch bulbs blinking on one by one. The callers caught a last stripe of gold before light thinned. She paused at the mural, touched matte sky, and smiled at the curve of shapes drawn by kids who had learned to see gentleness as power. Tim bicycled up with flyers for the next open session, brakes chirping, grin wide. Sarah waved from her doorway, lifting a jam jar of daisies for the donation table. Bennett locked the gate, then ran his hand over the bench rail as if polishing the burned message again. Clara handed Lily a sweater. James tossed one end like a cape, calling her commander of calm until she rolled her eyes and laughed. The team settled on the grass, noses tucked, chests rising in the same unhurried measure that had become the town's song. Behind them a family posed by the fence, faces lit by something gentler than screens. A group of teens filmed a demonstration sign rather than themselves, then put their phones away and practiced until a posture felt right. A letter carrier saluted, promising stamps for the stars showed early, crickets began their chorus, and the square exhaled. Tomorrow would bring errands, dishes, forgotten homework, maybe a loose dog by the creek or a loose rumor at the cafe, and the town would meet all of it with steadier hearts because a small voice had shown how. Please listen. Lily's story shows us that kindness and trust can change everything. Share this tale with someone who needs to hear it, and let's spread courage together.